Here's today's edition of Severe Thunderstorm Risk. The whole purpose of this video is to talk about severe thunderstorm threats for the next several days and sometimes even as much as a week in advance. Thankfully, this whole pattern has settled down quite a bit, although there are still some significant pockets of possible severe weather. That's saying something for being in the middle of July when typically your patterns are a lot less organized. But if you look at today's severe thunderstorm risk, we see 3 patches of the yellow. That catches your attention. That's the level 2, which is still referred to as slight risk from when they had less of these categories. And it's usually the level where you start paying a little bit more attention because these categories are all based on a little bit on intensity and a lot on coverage. So how many storms are expected in an organized fashion? So when you see the yellow, which is the level 2, it's probably time to take notice a little bit more. So there's 3 distinct areas. This one's been showing up for days in the Carolinas, mostly South Carolina, in fact, almost entirely covering South Carolina. Then we have this other little monsoonal patch down here from Phoenix down to the Mexico border. And then this little interesting patch up here in the UP of Michigan where there aren't many people, but you don't usually see slight risks up there, and especially confined to the UP like that one is, and especially when I show you in a second what the threat is expected to be. We'll take a look at the severe wind risk, which really encompasses the majority of the risk with those 3 areas. You can see it mirrors those slight risk areas almost exactly. In fact, probably exactly. I didn't check specifically, but and that this time of year, wind risk does become the more significant of the 3, which is tornado, wind, and hail. Now, on the subject of tornado, this is what's interesting. There's a 2% tornado risk in the UP of Michigan, most of it anyway, and that northern sliver there of Wisconsin. So again, not something you typically see. I did see a tornado warning up there a few weeks ago. I think I even snapped a shot of it. I don't think it ever produced a tornado. I think it produced a funnel cloud. But it's not an area of the country where you usually see a tornado threat, especially, or much of a severe weather threat, really, unless it is this time of year and you have these thunderstorm clusters that come flying out of the northwest across the northern plains, the Great Lakes states, even into New England. This is not quite that situation, but it's more actually of a hail risk than anything else because they have actually outlined in that part of the world a 15% hail risk and also a significant, and I forgot to put it on there, but this heavily weighs toward the lower end of the hail risk, basically. But still, an outside chance you could get a 2-inch hailstone out of that. On CSU's outlook for today, a no-show on the tornado, a little bit of hail in the UP, but the wind risk clearly shows up and has now consistently for a while in the Carolinas, mostly South Carolina, and a pretty good chunk of Georgia as well. We'll turn the page to Monday when we have that still kind of an isolated chance of a severe storm, what the Storm Prediction Center calls marginal, level 1. Columbia, South Carolina is in that, Savannah, Charleston, Macon, Georgia, even as far south as Jacksonville, Florida, could see a few very isolated storms. And the main risk, again, I think with that would be a wind. And CSU not really talking a whole lot about the Southeast at all on their outlook, and really a pretty quiet day unless you're up in Southeast Canada there. So that's Monday. Tuesday, there is a very marginal risk out in Montana, but your eyes are on the Northeast especially. If we zoom in on that, a good chunk of Maine and the northern parts of Vermont and New Hampshire and New York State are in that level 2. And again, if we take a look, this is a good breakdown of the risk expected. There is a little bit of a tornado risk showing up on CSU's outlook for that part of New England, as much as a 5%. That's the brown showing up in some parts. Most of it's 2%. Hail and wind are about equally chanced out there at about 15%. So that's a significant little wave moving through that part of the country. And this time of year, your severe weather is best organized in the northern plains, mostly because that's the only place where the jet stream exists to any strength level at all. And then the wind risk this time of year, usually, like in the south especially, is because thunderstorms are collapsing on themselves and producing severe wind gusts in a very localized fashion. So that's Tuesday. We'll skip over Wednesday and Thursday because there's really not much going on either of those days. And then the Storm Prediction Center has outlined, and this moved even from yesterday, this area here from Pittsburgh, PA, sweeping south eastward through Washington, Richmond, and Baltimore. And so that is on Friday. Again, a lot of people on the beaches there probably this summer. So be on lookout. This is floated around a little bit and probably will continue to do so. But it is getting infringing on the weekend part. But if I look beyond Friday, I don't see a lot of threats beyond that day. So this harks of a frontal system that drops in here and probably some sort of northwest flow regime there. On the supercell composite outlook for week 1, we have New England showing up. Again, this is a composite. It's not a specific forecast for any given day. It's just we're adding up all the threats, basically. And we're looking for supercells here, which is assumed to be what produces most of the organized severe weather. The threats are not as high. The shading indicates the percentage chance. You can see it down here. It's somewhere between the greens and the yellows, and maybe a few of the reds getting up in the upper 20%, 30% percentile there. And then in week 2, again, that's the 19th through the 25th, and 7 days after that. Definitely some stable air moving into New England. And again, this zone here that's just kind of comprised of probably maybe some Boeing segments or some frontal systems that drop on through here, highlighting the risk. And then week 3, which I'm a little always kind of suspicious of because it's way out there, but this goes already to August 1st, and we have a supercell composite that's actually showing up pretty high in Minnesota, Wisconsin, parts of Iowa, certainly up into the Dakotas, and back up into Canada.